After 15 years of marriage, when my husband asked for a divorce, I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I simply nodded, signed the papers, and watched the man I had once believed to be my partner walk away without a second glance. That evening, he celebrated his new life with his mistress, at the same cozy Italian restaurant where he had proposed to me. But I wasn't there to reminisce. I walked in, head held high, heels clicking on marble, and stopped at their table with a polite smile. "Congratulations on your freedom," I said, slipping a cream-colored envelope across the table. He laughed, smug and condescending, until he opened it. The smile fell from his face like a curtain in a dark theater. Inside was a DNA test. What ended our marriage wasn't the sound of broken glass or slammed doors. It was the quiet horror of truth. I had found the evidence not in his phone, not through a private investigator, but in our shared walk-in closet. His white dress shirt tucked inside his gym bag, stained with blood-red lipstick. It was a Tuesday morning, 9:17 a.m. I remember it clearly. Our twin boys were at school. Our daughter, Grace, was at her piano lesson. I was gathering clothes for dry cleaning, doing what I always did, keeping the family life running smoothly. The shirt was supposed to have been worn during an emergency surgery the night before. But I've been married to a cardiac surgeon long enough to know. No one wears crimson lipstick into an operating room. My hands trembled as I held the fabric. That stain wasn't medical. It was personal. I stood there frozen, the quiet hum of suburban comfort around me. The manicured lawn, the white picket fence, the framed family portraits. We were the so-called perfect Harpers. Ben Harper, the brilliant surgeon with steady hands. Me, the ever-devoted wife, the fundraiser organizer, the supportive partner who gave up her career to build his. He would wrap an arm around my waist at hospital events and declare, "None of this would be possible without Natalie." The other doctors' wives would smile, envy glimmering in their eyes. From the outside, we had it all: 3 wonderful children, financial security, and what looked like an unbreakable marriage. But looking back, the signs were there. He started coming home later. Said the hospital was short-staffed. Golf weekends became more frequent. Our conversations turned into logistical meetings, school schedules, grocery lists, donor dinners. When he was promoted to chief of cardiac surgery, I threw him a celebration party. He thanked me in front of everyone, smiling for the cameras. But that night, he slept in the guest room and told me I'd embarrassed him. I told my sister, "He's just stressed. It's the pressure." She warned me, "Natalie, power changes men." I didn't listen. I blamed the long surgeries. I bought new lingerie. I booked date nights. I did everything women's magazines told me to do to keep the spark alive. He went along with it, half-heartedly, checking his phone the whole time. One night I made his favorite meal. He barely touched it. "Is everything okay between us?" I asked. "I'm just tired. The Montgomery case is a nightmare," he muttered, retreating into his office, door closed, voice low, taking calls long into the night. I believed in trust. I believed in giving space. I never checked his phone. That was for insecure women, I told myself. That wasn't me. I was the strong one, the understanding one. Then came our 15th anniversary. I had planned a surprise getaway to Napa Valley, where we had honeymooned. I needed to make sure his schedule was clear, so I glanced at his phone while he was showering. Just a quick check. One message lit up the screen. "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to feel you again. When are you leaving her? Dr. Sabrina Ellis." I opened the thread. Hundreds of messages, photos, plans made while I was at PDA meetings, while I was helping our son build his science fair volcano. Cruel jokes about me. One said, "She's planning some surprise for the anniversary. Poor thing still thinks there's something to celebrate." I closed the phone, made his coffee, kissed him goodbye, then locked myself in the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left inside me. That night, after the kids fell asleep, I asked him quietly, plainly, if he was sleeping with Sabrina. He didn't flinch. Just took off his watch, placed it on the nightstand. "Yes." No apology. No shame. "I want a divorce," he said, his voice cold, efficient. "I've outgrown this life." "Outgrown you?" He gestured around our bedroom as if it were a prison. "I've given 15 years to this marriage. I'm 45. If I'm starting over, it has to be now." I stared at him, stunned. "We built this life together, Ben. He laughed, bitter, dismissive. No, Natalie. I built it. You were the background. The support cast. That night, he slept in the guest room again. I laid awake staring at the ceiling trying to remember what was real and what had always been a lie. But one thing I knew. The stain on that shirt wasn't just lipstick. It was the beginning of the end and the start of something new. For years I believed trust was sacred. That checking someone's phone was for insecure women. Not for someone like me. Not for Claire Morgan, the devoted wife, the dependable mother. The woman who supported her brilliant surgeon husband through 15 years of everything. But when our 15th anniversary approached, something inside me shifted. I had planned a romantic getaway to Napa Valley, where Daniel and I had honeymooned. A chance to reconnect, to rediscover the spark that had been fading for far too long. I needed to check his schedule. His phone was on the kitchen counter while he showered. I told myself it was just a quick glance. Just to sync calendars. That's all I intended. But then the notification lit up the screen. A message from Dr. Rebecca Ellis. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. When are you leaving her? My fingers trembled as I opened the message thread. What I found wasn't one slip-up. It was a graveyard of betrayal, hundreds of texts spanning 8 months, intimate photos, plans made while I was driving our daughter Lily to dance class or helping the twins with their science projects. And then, as if to twist the knife deeper, a message from Rebecca that read, "She's planning some big anniversary surprise. Poor thing still thinks there's something to celebrate." I quietly put the phone back, made Daniel his usual black coffee, kissed him goodbye, and watched him leave for the hospital. Then I collapsed in the bathroom and vomited until my body ached from the effort. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, the same room where we had built a family, grieved lost pregnancies, and held each other through my father's passing. The air was thick with a kind of silence I had never known. "Are you sleeping with Rebecca Ellis?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Daniel didn't even blink. He took off his watch, placed it neatly on the nightstand and said, "Yes." "How long? Does it matter?" I didn't recognize the man in front of me. His coldness was surgical, precise. This wasn't a confession, it was an execution. "I want a divorce, Claire," he said. "I've outgrown this life. Outgrown us." He gestured around the room, as if our marriage was nothing but a dated set piece. "I'm 45, he added. "If I'm going to start over, it has to be now." "But we built this life together," I whispered. He let out a bitter laugh. "No, I built it. You planned bake sales and organized my sock drawer while I saved lives. You were the anchor, domesticity." Every word landed like a slap. I had paused my career as a high school teacher to support him through med school, managed every detail of our children's lives, hosted dinner after dinner to help him climb the hospital ladder. And now he was erasing it all with a smirk and a line about starting over. "You'll be taken care of financially," he added, as though discussing a client's contract. "The kids will adjust. Children always do." He slept in the guest room that night. I lay awake in the dark staring at the ceiling fan, retracing 15 years of shared life, wondering what, if anything, had ever been real. At dawn, he left for the hospital without a word. On the kitchen counter, I found a business card for his lawyer, placed beside the coffee I no longer made. The life I thought we had, the perfect Morgans, as everyone called us, had been a mirage. The lipstick stain and the affair? They were just surface cracks. What lay beneath was far worse. I called the most ruthless divorce attorney in our city, Patricia Lang, and met with her the very next day. "Start documenting everything," she told me, "especially the finances." That evening, after the kids were tucked in with vague reassurances, "Daddy's working late again," I opened our home safe. Inside were 15 years of tax returns, investment records, property deeds. As I sifted through the neatly labeled folders, a disturbing pattern emerged, like dark threads hidden in fine silk. Monthly withdrawals, $5,000, $7,500, even $10,000, routinely pulled from our joint savings over the past 2 years, all sent to a shadowy entity called Clearwater Holdings. There were no receipts, no explanations, and no sign that any of it was meant to benefit our family. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was strategy. It was theft. It was a man quietly rewriting his future, without us in it. But what Daniel didn't know was that I was no longer the silent partner in his story. I was about to become the author of my own. And I had just begun turning the pages. A week after Daniel left his lawyer's business card on our kitchen counter like a receipt for a broken marriage, I sat across from my divorce attorney, Patricia Lang, reviewing years of financial records I had pulled from our home safe. "You're telling me he transferred over $250,000 to something called Clearwater Holdings?" she asked, squinting at the statements through her narrow reading glasses. "Yes," I said, sliding the papers across her mahogany desk. "And there's no explanation. No receipts. Just withdrawal after withdrawal." Patricia let out a soft breath. "This isn't just hiding assets. This looks calculated, strategic, long-term." Then she paused. "A name came up in another case like this," she added. "Dr. Thomas Reed. Ever heard of him?" I remembered him vaguely. Quiet, kind, always seemed a little uncomfortable at hospital functions. He disappeared from the medical scene years ago without much explanation. When I asked Daniel about it at the time, he brushed it off as professional differences. I never pushed further. But now, I couldn't ignore it. It took 5 calls to track down Dr. Reed. He was working at a small family clinic nearly 40 miles outside the city. His receptionist was guarded, until I mentioned Daniel's name. Then I was transferred immediately. "Mrs. Morgan," his voice said low and steady, "I've been expecting your call for years. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes." He looked older than I remembered, deep lines, graying temples, tired eyes, but there was a clarity in his gaze that told me he had carried this burden far too long. "I always knew this day would come," he said. "I just didn't know who would break first, me with my conscience or Daniel with his arrogance." My stomach nodded. I hadn't even taken a sip of my coffee. "What are you saying?" I asked. "The fertility clinic at Westbridge had a problem," he said, almost in a whisper. "Several couples experienced failed IVF cycles, even though their labs and charts looked perfect on paper. I noticed small inconsistencies, nothing glaring but enough to raise alarms." My heart dropped. "We went through 5 rounds of IVF," I said. 3 for the twins. 2 more for Lily. It was brutal. Every failure felt like a death. Every success a miracle. He nodded gently. I started digging. Quietly. What I found was devastating. Dr. Mercer, the clinic director, had been falsifying results, swapping specimens, manipulating data to boost success rates and secure continued funding. I confronted him. "And Daniel?" I whispered. "He knew," Dr. Reed said. "More than knew. He was complicit." I couldn't breathe. "That's impossible," I managed. "Daniel wanted children. We both did." Dr. Reed reached into his coat pocket and slid a small thumb drive across the table. "Hospital memos, lab records, authorizations, all signed by your husband." He called them procedural modifications. But what they really were was tampering. My hands trembled as I stared at the drive, the truth pulsing inside its silver casing like a live wire. "But why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "At first? Ambition," he said. "Mercer was on the board that eventually promoted Daniel to chief. Helping him cover this up came with benefits." He hesitated, then continued. "But there's something else. Daniel has a genetic heart condition, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's mild in his case, but there's a 50% chance it can be passed on." The words hit like a tidal wave. I gripped the edge of the table, struggling to steady myself. "He didn't want to risk his children inheriting it," Dr. Reed said gently. "Not because he feared for their health, but because he feared it might damage his image. A top surgeon with genetically compromised kids? It didn't fit his perfect narrative. So during every IVF cycle, while I injected hormones, counted days, cried alone in the bathroom, he made sure his sperm was never used. He lied to me. He robbed me of the truth. He built a family on a foundation of deliberate deception, and let me believe we were in it together." I left the cafe with that thumb drive burning a hole in my purse. It held answers I never asked for, and a truth that would change everything. But now I wasn't just a woman mourning her marriage. I was a mother protecting her children, and a woman finally prepared to fight back. That night, after the kids were asleep, I moved through the house in silence, calm, collected, clinical. I carefully gathered strands of hair from their brushes, dabbed saliva from their toothbrushes, and sealed them in sterile envelopes. I even added a comb from Daniel's bathroom drawer, untouched since he started sleeping elsewhere. Then came the waiting. The 2 weeks between collection and results were excruciating. Meanwhile, Daniel had ramped up the divorce proceedings. His lawyer demanded custody evaluations, claiming I was emotionally unstable. They painted me as an unfit mother, a woman with no career, no assets, a liability to my own children. They offered a settlement that would leave me barely enough to survive, an insult wrapped in legal language. It was a power play, a tactic to force me into surrender. I didn't flinch. I helped the twins with their science projects. I cheered at Lily's piano recital. I smiled at school drop-offs even when other moms asked, "Where's Daniel these days?" "On call again," I'd say. "You know how it is." At night I dug deep. I read case after case of fertility fraud. Doctors swapping sperm samples, parents discovering decades later that their children weren't biologically theirs. But nowhere in any court document or medical journal did I find a case like mine. A husband, my husband, who had deliberately ensured that our children were never genetically his, while crafting the illusion that we were the perfect family. Then on a Tuesday morning the call came. "Mrs. Morgan, we have your results," the woman's voice said, professional and detached. "Would you prefer we email them? Or discuss them by phone?" "Email," I whispered. I needed to see the truth, to stare it in the face. The report was clinical, unforgiving. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested children. The probability of paternity is 0%. I printed 3 copies, one for my attorney, one for the safety deposit box I had opened in my name only, and one I sealed in a cream-colored envelope marked with the Westbridge Medical Center logo, taken from Daniel's home office. During those weeks of pretending everything was fine, I'd been quietly collecting more than just DNA. My hands didn't shake anymore. The grief had hardened into something else, sharper, clearer, strategic. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about choice. About the 15 years I had lived inside a beautifully wrapped lie. About the identity I'd built as a mother, crafted from devotion, shaped by sacrifice. All while the man beside me played the role of benevolent husband and heroic surgeon. Now, with the truth in my hands, I finally had the power to change his story. I started with the other families. I contacted Dr. Reed, the same physician who had exposed Daniel's involvement, and asked if he knew of anyone else who'd undergone treatment during Daniel's oversight. He provided a list. 27 families. Most refused to speak with me. Denial is easier than unraveling your child's history. But 5 agreed to meet. The Millers had twin boys with no genetic resemblance to either parent. The Patel's daughter had an unexpected autoimmune disorder that ran nowhere in their bloodline. The Johnsons, Garcias, and Wilsons each had experienced miracle pregnancies after multiple failed cycles. All shared one common detail. Their cases had suddenly succeeded once Dr. Mercer or Daniel had taken a personal interest. "We were just so grateful," Sarah Wilson told me, tears sliding down her cheeks. "We never questioned the how." My search eventually led me to a woman named Diane Fletcher, a former nurse who had worked at the clinic for over a decade. We met in her modest apartment outside the city. The walls were lined with metal filing cabinets, a fortress of secrets no one else had dared to keep. "I saved everything," she said, voice shaking as she pulled open a drawer. Inside was a leather-bound journal, meticulously organized. Patient names, dates, procedures, signatures authorizing sample swaps, notations of specimen quality concerns. Most chilling of all, Daniel's signature, page after page, authorizing adjustments in cases involving known hereditary risks. "Why didn't you report this?" I asked. Her smile was tired, bitter. "I tried. Hospital administration, medical ethics board, even the police. Every time it disappeared. Your husband has powerful friends, Mrs. Morgan. And yet there it was, my name, my IVF cycle, my children." Daniel had signed off on the substitution of his own genetic material for anonymous donors. He didn't just lie to me. He erased himself from our family by choice. I photographed every page, every signature, every lie he'd buried beneath his perfectly polished life. And I wasn't done. The world had always seen Daniel as a brilliant surgeon, a savior, a man of integrity, but I had the receipts, and the truth. And this time I wouldn't be the one silenced. Diane Fletcher lived in a modest apartment on the edge of town, surrounded by filing cabinets that hummed with years of secrets. She was a former nurse at Westbridge Fertility Clinic, a woman who had once walked those sterile halls under Daniel's leadership and walked away with more than just memories. I kept everything, she said, her voice low and trembling. They thought I destroyed it all when I left. Why didn't you report them? I asked. Her smile was tired, bitter. I did. I went to hospital administration, the medical ethics board, even the police. Every time the investigation just disappeared. Your husband has powerful friends, Mrs. Morgan. She pulled out a leather-bound journal. Inside, 8 years' worth of notes, lab records, consent forms, many of them falsified, patient names, procedural modifications, specimen substitutions, and signature after signature, all belonging to Dr. Daniel Morgan. Protocol adjustments, the paperwork read, especially in cases involving genetic risk factors. My voice shook. What about my case? She flipped to a tabbed page marked with my name. The date matched the start of our IVF process. In careful script, specimen replacement authorized. Quality concerns cited. No donor identification recorded. Below it, Daniel's signature. I photographed every page, every damning note, knowing what I held wasn't just proof of deception. It was the blueprint of a man's calculated betrayal. As I left, Diane pressed a business card into my hand. Call the Medical Ethics Investigation Unit. Ask for Agent Dawson. Tell him I sent you. Agent Michael Dawson met me in a nondescript government office 2 days later. He had been building a case against the Westbridge Clinic for over 18 months, but said he kept hitting a wall of silence. Your documentation might finally break it open, he said, scanning the journal pages. But we need more, he added. Financial trails, kickbacks, testimonies. Someone from the inside who'll talk. I made a decision right then. I would give him everything. But I had to be smart. In public, I played the part of the woman quietly unraveling. I smiled sadly at Daniel during mediation sessions, agreed to temporary custody arrangements, pretended to consider his insulting financial settlement. You're being surprisingly reasonable, Daniel told me during one meeting, his tone dripping with condescension. The children come first, I whispered. I just want what's best for everyone. With each false concession, his confidence grew. He introduced Rebecca to our children. She began attending school events, even staying overnight at Daniel's downtown apartment during visitation weekends. All the while, I was recording conversations, photographing documents, and threading together the legal noose that would soon tighten around his perfect little world. Then came the unexpected twist. I had hired a private investigator to look into Rebecca's background. What he found floored me. She wasn't just Daniel's colleague and lover. She was Rebecca Harrington, daughter of Melline Harrington, a patient who had died during a routine valve replacement surgery under Daniel's care 5 years earlier. Back then, Daniel claimed the woman had failed to disclose her medications. The hospital cleared him after a brief investigation, but Agent Dawson, through subpoenaed records, revealed the truth. Daniel had been operating on just a few hours of sleep, fresh off a weekend in Chicago with Rebecca. He'd made a fatal error. The records had been falsified. The hospital used hush money to pay off the family. Melline's husband died a year later from heart failure brought on by grief and stress. Rebecca, orphaned and furious, changed her last name and erased her past, only to re-enter Daniel's world as a colleague, then his mistress. Her revenge had been years in the making, just like mine. For a moment I considered confronting her, maybe even suggesting we take him down together. But I didn't. Rebecca's rage was emotional, unpredictable. Mine had become something else entirely, precise, methodical, and patient. Over the next month, I gathered sworn statements from former clinic employees, traced the money trail from Westbridge to Clearwater Holdings to offshore accounts, and worked closely with Agent Dawson, who quietly built the case. Daniel had constructed a life of lies for over a decade. I was going to dismantle it in one night. And I was almost ready. I knew Daniel Morgan had spent 15 years carefully curating a lie. And I was about to destroy it, publicly, precisely, and without mercy. One evening during a co-parenting conversation, I gently steered the topic toward our children. "The twins have your eyes," I said casually. He didn't even look up from his phone. "Good genes," he murmured. "Do you ever wonder if they inherited your heart condition?" I asked, watching him closely. His head snapped up. "What?" "Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy," I said. "Dr. Reed mentioned it." Daniel's face darkened. "Reed needs to keep his mouth shut about things that don't concern him." "Don't our children's health concern him?" "Concern me. There's nothing to worry about," he said, brushing it off. "I had them tested years ago. They're fine." "You tested them?" I asked, stunned. "Without telling me? I'm their father. And a doctor. I made a medical decision." I kept my expression calm, but inside I was on fire. The recording captured everything. His acknowledgement of the genetic condition, the secret tests, and his continued charade of being their biological father. It was the final piece Agent Dawson needed. The timing was perfect. The Westbridge Medical Center Gala was only a week away. The most prestigious event of the hospital's year. Daniel was slated to receive the Physician of the Year award for groundbreaking contributions to cardiac care and his unwavering ethical standards. The invitation still arrived addressed to both of us, despite the pending divorce. Daniel sent me a text. "Taking Rebecca as my date. You're welcome to attend if it's not too awkward." I responded with a blend of wounded grace and quiet strength. "I wouldn't miss it. You deserve the recognition." What he didn't know was that I had already met with the hospital board chairman. I had handed over curated pieces of evidence, just enough to raise questions, not enough to alert Daniel. A closed-door emergency session had been scheduled, right before the gala. Agent Dawson would be there, presenting the full case. The financial corruption, the fertility fraud, the manipulated records. Every lie. As I prepared for the evening, I slipped into the black dress Daniel once said made me look like I was trying too hard. My hair was swept up. The diamond earrings he had once gifted me caught the light, fitting since that woman, the woman who believed in him, no longer existed. I received one final detail before leaving. Daniel and Rebecca had reservations at Vincenzo's after the gala, the very restaurant where he had proposed to me 15 years earlier. The symmetry was almost poetic. The night arrived, thunderclouds brooding above the city but holding back. The air was thick with anticipation. I entered the ballroom alone, a vision of calm fury among the glittering elite. I spotted Daniel instantly. He stood near the stage, arm wrapped possessively around Rebecca's waist. She wore crimson, the exact shade of the lipstick that had started this entire cascade. Board members hovered around them, laughing at his jokes, admiring his charm, his brilliance, his carefully manufactured life. None of them knew that just 30 minutes earlier, I had watched from a side room as Agent Dawson presented the truth. Patient testimonies, financial records, sworn statements, Diane Fletcher's damning journal. I watched as skepticism turned to horror, and then to silent, grim determination. The hospital's legal counsel contacted the district attorney that same night. And now, as Daniel soaked up congratulations, smiling that charming rehearsed smile, he had no idea police officers were already positioned at every exit. No idea that the lies he'd hidden behind for years were about to be stripped away. He believed this was his night, but it was mine. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't the accessory to his success. I was the architect of his fall, and the truth was about to take center stage. Daniel's perfect world was seconds from collapse, and he had no idea. I walked the ballroom like a ghost through a masquerade, mingling with people who had once called me the lucky wife, accepting murmured condolences for my failing marriage. The same women who had pitted me for being left behind were now clutching pearls over Daniel's sparkling success with his new love. "So brave of you to come tonight," whispered Margaret Reynolds, wife of the hospital's chief of surgery. Her smile was genuine, but her eyes kept drifting to Daniel and Rebecca near the stage. I wouldn't miss seeing Daniel receive the recognition he worked so hard for. I said with a polite smile that made her visibly uncomfortable. The ceremony began, and with the elegance of a seasoned showman, Daniel stepped on stage to a standing ovation. The award glistened in his hand, Physician of the Year, the highest honor Westbridge Medical Center bestowed. He spoke into the microphone like a man who had never been to rule in his life. Medicine isn't just science, he declared, voice rich and confident. It's a sacred trust. Between doctor and patient, between ethics and action. Every decision must be made with integrity. I studied Rebecca as he spoke. Her shoulders were tight. Her smile calculated. She looked at him the way I had for 15 years, except her performance had a very different motive. Our eyes met across the room. And in that split second, a silent understanding passed between us. We both knew who he really was. After the applause faded, they left for Vincenzo's, just as I had hoped. 20 minutes later I followed, my clutch holding the envelope that would end everything. The restaurant hadn't changed. White tablecloths. Low lighting. The soft swell of Italian opera. The maitre d' recognized me instantly. Mrs. Morgan, he said warmly. Your husband mentioned you might be joining them. Of course he did. Daniel was either confident I'd grovel, or had planned one final public humiliation. But it would be my curtain call, not his. They were seated at our old favorite table near the window. He'd ordered the same vintage Bordeaux we shared for our 10th anniversary. The bottle alone cost more than a month of groceries for our kids. Daniel looked up first. His expression shifted from surprise to smugness. He assumed I'd come to beg. Rebecca's face arranged itself into polite concern. Claire, Daniel said in that condescending tone he had perfected. This is unexpected. Is it? I said evenly, walking toward the table. You told the maitre d' I might join you. I thought I'd take you up on that. Rebecca shifted in her seat. Perhaps I should give you two a moment. Please stay, I said, locking eyes with her. You've earned your seat at this table, Rebecca. Or should I say, Rebecca Harrington. Her face went pale. Daniel blinked, confused. What are you talking about? She knows, I said, still calm. She's the daughter of Melline Harrington, the patient who died on your operating table, the one whose case you covered up. You were exhausted after a weekend away with her. You falsified the records, Daniel. You buried the truth. And you buried her mother. He turned to Rebecca, who stared silently at the tablecloth. Is this true? He asked. Her silence was confirmation. And while he reeled, I placed the cream-colored envelope between the wine glasses. Congratulations on your freedom, I said, my voice low. I think you'll find this enlightening. Daniel's hand trembled as he opened the envelope. The moment his eyes scanned the DNA results, his face transformed, from confusion to disbelief to horror. This is impossible, he whispered. Is it? I said. You made sure your sperm was never used during our IVF. You falsified medical records. You constructed a lie so elaborate, you actually believed it. Rebecca stared at the paper, then at Daniel. What is she talking about? Nothing, he snapped, trying to regain control. Claire's fabricating stories because she can't accept our divorce. Then you won't mind explaining this, I said, tilting my head toward the restaurant entrance. Agent Dawson stepped into view, followed by the hospital board chair and two uniformed officers. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. This was no longer a divorce. This was exposure, justice, and finally freedom. Daniel's face twisted with rage as I gestured toward the restaurant entrance. You can explain it, I said softly, to the hospital board, or the district attorney's office, or to our children. Before he could reply, Agent Dawson stepped forward. Dr. Daniel Morgan, he said clearly, I'm placing you under arrest for medical fraud, financial crimes, and ethical violations under the Medical Practice Act. The restaurant went silent. Wine glasses paused mid-air. Forks stopped clinking against porcelain. Rebecca sat frozen, her perfect composure unraveling. Her revenge had taken years to orchestrate. But what she witnessed now, this moment, was far beyond anything she had planned. You've been planning this, Daniel hissed as the officer fastened handcuffs around his wrists. Yes, I said, rising from my seat. You had 15 years to live your lie. I only needed 3 months to expose it. They led him away, shoulders hunched, pride shattered. Rebecca remained at the table, her gaze fixed on her half-empty glass of Bordeaux. I didn't know about the children, she said quietly. I believe you, I replied, my voice softer. Your mother deserved justice too. In the weeks that followed, the story exploded across medical journals and mainstream media. Daniel faced multiple felony charges. His medical license was suspended pending trial. Westbridge Fertility Clinic was shut down for a full investigation. Families across the country came forward, searching for answers about their children's genetic origins. Financially, his empire crumbled. Every hidden account was frozen. A court-appointed forensic accountant traced every dollar he had siphoned away. The money was reclaimed, and a trust fund was established for our children, ensuring their future, free from the lies he had built. After Daniel's preliminary hearing, Dr. Reed approached me. We're establishing an ethics review committee, he said, to oversee all reproductive services when the clinic reopens. I've recommended you co-chair it. The offer stunned me. For 15 years, I had been Mrs. Claire Morgan, the doctor's wife. My identity had been swallowed by Daniel's career. His name, his status, his image. Now I was being asked to step into a role that was entirely mine. 6 months later, I sat across from Rebecca at a different restaurant. The tension that once crackled between us had faded, replaced by something more complex. Two women who had been manipulated by the same man in vastly different ways, and had chosen to reclaim their power. Do you regret it? She asked. Exposing everything? The children will find out the truth. I thought for a moment, then answered honestly. They'll learn that their beginnings weren't what we believed. But that doesn't change who they are, or how deeply I love them. The foundation of their lives may have been built on lies. But I chose truth, however painful. That night, as I watched my children sleep in the home Daniel once tried to force me to sell, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not vengeance. Not even satisfaction. Liberation. The illusion of a perfect family had shattered. But in its place was something far more powerful. Authenticity. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't living in someone else's story. I was writing my own. Messy. Complicated. And finally, completely mine. Sometimes the most powerful strength a woman can show is silence turned into strategy. Claire's journey reminds us that even after betrayal, heartbreak, and years of being overlooked, we are never powerless. Truth, no matter how painful, sets us free. This story isn't just about exposing a lie. It's about reclaiming your voice, your worth, and your future. For every woman who has ever sacrificed her dreams for someone else's success, remember, it's never too late to write your own story. If Claire's courage inspired you, hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more powerful tales of women rising through betrayal. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done in her place?